You for joining our webinar on From Project to Program. My name is Kelley Okolita, and I'm going to walk you through the process of transitioning your business continuity project into an ongoing program that brings value to your company. So my job and yours, if you are a business continuity planner, is to preach gloom and doom. I'm actually introduced myself as Cambia's gloom and doom queen, and that's so we are making plans for potential risks as opposed to panicking when a risk actually occurs. And this slide's pretty timely right now since we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Uh, Risk management and business continuity planning are part of the same process. Business continuity lives in the risk management world, but it's really not part of strategic risk or financial risk or organizational risk or technology risk or operational risk or legal or regulatory risk. It's really about the risk of events, all of which could impact your strategic, financial, organization, technology, or operational issues, but it's really about the risk of loss resulting from an unexpected event that interferes with your normal business. That's where business continuity fits within the risk management framework. It's important that we move from we got this to we understand this. You know, when I first started doing business continuity program, it was all about being in compliance. I worked in the financial services industry, and we are very focused on making sure we are in compliance with the regulations around having a business continuity and disaster recovery program. And our second driver was financial loss avoidance. We wanted to make sure that we didn't lose a lot of money should we have a disaster event. And then the last two things we talked about was brand and reputation and impact to operations. When you really get into it, all events are about impact to operations, because impact to operations is how we get in trouble with compliance and lose money. So we really need to turn this upside down and focus as we build our program around the impact a particular type of an event might have on your ability to operate as you normally do. Doesn't matter what your business is, it's about impact to operations. And then after impact operations, it really is brand and reputation, because I will tell you, it can take years to build a brand, to build a reputation in an industry, and it can take minutes to lose it. So brand and reputation, those things that are going to impact your business and cause an impact to your brand or reputation, are the things you should be most focusing on. And if you focus on those two things, you avoid that financial loss and you basically stay in compliance. So we've kind of turned this upside down and said we're going to focus on impact to operations, because we don't want to just check the box anymore. Used to be that if you just checked the box and it didn't matter whether your program worked or not, you got an okay from the auditors. But really, if you're going to build something that actually works, it really is around understanding the impact. Because all real business impact flows from disruption to operations. So just to look back at where I started from this industry, I have more than 25 years experience in business continuity management. I've not only built programs, I've actually had to do recoveries. I had a number of small recoveries, but the larger ones were I had 850 people across the street from the towers in New York on September 11th. I then left that financial services company and went to a property and casualty insurance company where I got to experience Katrina firsthand. So I've not only built programs, I've actually had to execute them when things happened for real. I joined my current company, Cambia Health Solutions, in 2010. At that time, the plan had just completed a business impact analysis and a risk assessment. And I will tell you, they made really nice paperweights. They were very big, had lots of data in it that was already old from the day they published it. They had LDRPS installed at the time, but it wasn't used properly. It hadn't been implemented properly. It wasn't being used properly. And they had a disaster recovery program that they spent $1 million on every year on a contract that would not have recovered their data center. There was an open item with the audit committee of the board of directors for almost 2 years before I was hired. And that was why I got this job, was because this audit item was open and had not yet been closed, and they wanted to bring in someone who they felt could make this happen. So 6 weeks into the job, I made a report to the audit committee on what was wrong with the program, what was wrong with their disaster recovery strategy, what was wrong with their business continuity program, how it was going to get fixed, and how long it was going to take. So the first 3 years working with Cambia, I rebuilt the program on the concept of site planning. We had 5 teams, which I'll explain to you in a minute, and we used InfoPath as the tool to collect the data. InfoPath is a Microsoft Office product. It's very Word-like. We're able to build some instructions and some training into the InfoPath tool as we ask people to collect the data. And then, but mostly, I will tell you this is very true, is you're building a program that this is all about relationships. So we spent those 3 years doing the training of those teams we developed, relationship building, exercises, managing real events, and leadership reporting. So I remember one of the early exercises we did with one of our local incident response teams, which I'll explain in a few minutes. The leader, the alert team, they would look at me like a deer in the headlights when we were doing a tabletop exercise, and he'd go, you know, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, how am I supposed to react? And it's like, you know, this is a plan, and it has a structure around it. But he was someone who worked in HR, and I asked him, every time you have a human resource issue, do you go to the human resource manual? And he said, no. I said, well, this plan is like your human resource manual. It's to help guide you when you respond to an event, but it doesn't mean you need to follow it page by page by page. And so it's really about doing those types of exercises, working through real events, and building those relationships that helps build that program. So we spent 18 months rebuilding the ITDR strategy and implementing it. And we built incident management plans. We built occupant emergency plans, which are about life safety. We built disaster recovery plans around the IT environment. We built business continuity plans across the entire business landscape. We built infectious disease plans. We built information incident plans and threat assessment plans. So those are the first 3 years, was really just about building out the program, building out the teams, doing training, building relationships, implementing that ITDR strategy and testing it, and getting the program all set. Again, I indicated that we do planning by site, and I will tell you that the reason we do it that way is that unless it's strictly an IT event, meaning your technology environment is impacted in some way, nearly every event is site related. It's power related, it's weather, it's network, it's water, it's fire, it's co-located site technologies. So we look at risks by site and we plan to recover by site. Now, obviously there are certain types of events like the one we're experiencing right now around this global pandemic that are not site related. So we do have specific plans and specific teams to deal with those non-site related events. But again, majority of the events that we have experienced, that I've experienced throughout my career, have been site related. They've been related to the physical site where something is, where that business operation is located. So here's the way we've structured our teams at Cambia. I'm going to start with the team on the very far right. This is called our Blue Alert team. Blue Alert, we are a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan in 4 states, and so we call them our Blue Alert team. And this is our life safety team. And our life safety team is trained to evacuate people safely, to how to shelter people or shelter in place, to lock down. We actually have trained about half of our entire staff through the Red Cross, and we pay for this training in basic first aid, CPR, and AED use, because we are a firm believer that everyone should learn to be their own first responder. So they're also responsible for that life safety, initial life safety response related to first aid if someone is having trouble in our office environments. And they're also about accounting for employees. If we did have an evacuation, we want to make sure we account for make sure that everybody who is in the building at the time that we required to be evacuated is accounted for. So we do They're required to do 2 types of exercises a year. They have to do at least 1 evacuation drill, at least 1. Some do more than 1, but they're required to do at least 1. They're also required to do an earthquake drill. All 4 of my states are an earthquake country. As a matter of fact, during this global pandemic, we've had earthquakes in 2 of our sites. Fortunately, they were not very large earthquakes and caused limited damage in our sites, but we're required to do an earthquake drill. So every year during the Great Shakeout, we do an earthquake drill as well. We do have 1 site in tornado country, so they actually do a tornado drill as well. So they're trained in that life safety response. So moving to the left, for every business line we have, excuse me, for every site they're located in, we have a business continuity planner that's assigned to document how they're going to manage the business impacts of losing that site. They're going to document how they manage the workload, how do they manage and communicate to staff, any detailed recovery procedures, so that no matter what happens, we can continue to take care of our customers, our providers, and manage our day-to-day operations. For all of our IT infrastructure and applications that are part of our top tier environments, I'm sure just like you have hundreds of applications in your environments. Not all of them are time sensitive. Some can be not brought back for a couple weeks or more without causing a significant business impact. So for our time sensitive IT disaster recovery environments, our technology recovery teams, our ITDR planners, are responsible for doing the same thing around every piece of technology that supports the business that is time sensitive. So every building we operate in has some level of technology in it, even if it's just a local print file server and some network gear. Our ITDR folks are responsible for making sure that we have a strategy, a tested and validated strategy for bringing that technology back. So obviously our data centers get more attention than the local stuff, but it is something that they're responsible. So they have a plan, just as the business continuity planners do, and they're required to do exercises. Now, the business continuity planners are required to do 3 types of exercises every year. They're responsible for doing a call tree exercise, making sure that they can reach out and get to their teams in response to an event. They're also required to do a walkthrough of their plan. So they're required to actually sit down with the people that have a role within the plan and actually just walk through the document to make sure that everything that we need to think about is documented inside that plan. And finally, the last thing they're required to do is a tabletop exercise. So they're required to do at least a tabletop exercise where they use a scenario and they use the plan to respond to that scenario. We often support those tabletop exercises for the planners. If they are assigned to a physical alternate site, they are responsible for also doing a test at that alternate site. From an ITDR, the business continuity planners, beyond testing, also are required to do twice a year updates to the plan document itself and to have it signed off by the senior leader once a year. So they have ongoing requirements that they have to meet in order to stay in compliance with the program. The ITDR folks are required the infrastructure actually is required to test once a quarter, and each application that lands on that infrastructure that is part of that top tier time sensitive group of applications that we focus most of our technology recovery on are required to test at least once a year. The actual plan documentation on the IT side is required to be updated quarterly because life happens and things change much more rapidly in the technology environment than it does in the business environment. So the quarterly updates to the plan to make sure that the information that's contained within the plan remains current. All right, so moving to the left again, we have local incident response teams. Now, those local incident response teams are built by site. So we have 9 major sites across 4 states, and each of them has a local incident response team. And that team is headed by alert commander and is supported by people from IT, from human resources, from legal, from compliance, from real estate and facilities, et cetera, and so forth. It's a large team, and clearly not every event requires that that entire team get activated. It is up to the alert commander to determine who she needs or he needs to bring forth to help manage a particular incident. But that local incident response team is responsible for managing the tactical response to what's happening in a site. So they're reacting to what's going on. They're making those short-term decisions. They're very process-oriented, very narrow, focused just on their site at this moment, this problem, and this time. So they're our tactical boots-on-the-ground response team. And that team does from little things like, hey, we're expecting snow tomorrow. Let's make a decision about how we're going to manage the site. Are we going to leave it open? We can do a delayed start, an early release, etc. So we want to make decisions at the site level when we have something happening in a site. We don't want to make decisions at a business line level, because then we have some business partners telling their employees that they can go home and others telling them they have to stay on site. So it's very important that we manage local incidents, even little ones like weather events, at that site level through this local incident response team. Now, the local incident response team has a plan. It's called an incident management plan related to their site, and they're actually required to do 2 exercises every year with that plan that we facilitate for them. So one is a site focused plan, so it's specifically focused on a particular risk that site might have. For example, one of our sites is very close to the local airport, and the site is at the end of the runway. And so one of the exercises we've done with them is an accident at the airport. Another site is very close to a river that tends to flood all the time. It's something that happens every year. It's sometimes worse, sometimes not so bad. So we've done an exercise with them around a flooding of that river that impacts the site. So we're trying to bring that realism on something that actually might happen, that could affect them, that we can walk through, talk through, and decide how we would respond to that particular event. The other exercise is done more at a global, so a Cambia-wide impact event, so something related to our network, our technology, infectious disease, et cetera, that might be affecting the entire organization versus just an individual site. So in addition to the local incident response teams, which again are very site focused at the business activities that happen in a specific site, we also have a cybersecurity incident management team. We have an infectious disease team. We have a data center team, and we have a threat assessment team. And these are the leaders, the tactical response leaders that are responsible for executing or overseeing the execution of a recovery, depending on the type of event that is occurring. So moving again to our left, we have what's called our corporate incident management team. And our corporate incident management team is our senior leaders, including the CEO and the president of the company and all of their direct reports, and a handful of other folks that are responsible not for doing that tactical boots on the ground response, but instead are responsible for leading the organization through this crisis. They're responsible for looking into the future, look at the long-term impacts that this particular event might have to our organization, anticipating how it might be perceived in the marketplace, for example. So they have, instead of that narrow tactical focus that the local incident response team has, or the business continuity planners or ITDR folks do, they're looking more at the strategic response to what's happening. They make sure that our principles and values come through as we respond, and are responsible for that wide focus and leading the organization through this, whatever the crisis event is. They also are required to do 2 tabletop exercises every year. So we've done everything with them from a workplace violence event to a fraud event to a cybersecurity incident, et cetera, to make sure that they are practiced in how they respond, and that they understand the different roles that the different teams have. Because if we don't manage this properly, then they're going to get down in the weeds and they're going to try to do this tactical response that we really want them to focus on, that strategic response to what's going on. So that's our organizational structure, how we've built the teams across the organization. And so what's in the actual plans? Well, planning, regardless of whether it's an incident management plan, a business continuity plan, an ITDR plan, or even the Blue Alert plans, we go through the same process. So all of our plans are built on this strategy. The first thing you have to do once an incident has been identified is gather. We need to gather the key decision makers about what's going on. So the process of gathering, how are we going to gather, where are we going to gather, who's going to gather the people, etc. That's the first step in the plan. The second step after an event occurs, once you've gathered those key decision makers, is to assess what's going on. So what happened and what's the impact and how long do we think it's going to last and who needs to be engaged and who needs to be told about what's going on. So during this assessment process, they're going to make some decisions. So the third step is to decide, what are we going to do about this? So, and the decisions could be decisions for that moment, or they could be decisions and that's the end of the event, similar to a weather event, for example. So when we have weather that's expected, we're going to gather our local incident response team. We're going to assess what's going on with the weather. We're going to decide what we're going to do about it. Once we've made those decisions, we're going to mobilize our response. So we're going to mobilize those people who need to act on the decisions that we've made. So whoever it is, we need to mobilize, whether it's a business continuity planner, an ITDR planner, we're going to mobilize our communications team, whoever it is, we're going to mobilize those people that have to act on the decisions that we just made. And then we have to communicate. We have to communicate to all our stakeholders, both internal and external, and about what we're doing, what happened, what we're doing about it, and how, what we expect to happen as a result of this event. And ultimately, we're going to recover. Now, when you have a weather event, it's really pretty quick. You have this one meeting, you gather, assess, decide, you mobilize, you communicate, and when the weather's over, you get back to business as normal. But some events don't have that short-lived response. Some events last a long time. September 11th, for example, was a long event. Katrina was a long event. This pandemic response is a long event. So what we do is we continue that process. We repeat that gather, assess, decide, mobilize, communicate until we get back to that new normal. So we are knee-deep in this process right now as Cambia responds to the global pandemic. So at the end of that period of time, that first 3 years, yay, everybody gets it. So everybody kind of understands their program, understands their roles. We've practiced it. We've actually responded to real events, and everybody gets it. So we're ready. We have plans and teams at various levels of the organization. We've practiced using our plans. We know we've adequately trained resources. We've used our plans to actually manage real events that have occurred to us. Organization trusts us because our value's been proved by the way we've managed those real events. And we've built a program all around it that has ongoing requirements that we report to leadership on a quarterly basis. So we've transitioned from this initial project where we had to implement and build all the structure and train all these people and now we have a program that has ongoing requirements across all of the teams and all of the plans we've built to make sure that we are reporting that we're keeping the program up to date and that people continue to understand what they need to do. The good news about this is we have great plans. We have a huge amount of data that's been collected. Everybody gets it, and the data center is recoverable, where it wasn't before. The bad news is we've collected all of this data inside a Word-like tool, so we can't mine the data easily. So we actually if someone came to me at that time and said, Kelley, I need to know who uses this application because we're thinking about retiring it because we don't think anybody uses it anymore. Excuse me. I'd have to actually open up each one of my 100+ business continuity plans to identify whether or not anyone identified this application as something that they used. Our reporting capabilities are limited. We can't really look across the landscape across everything and how everything intersects. So we can't get that big picture. We can't answer the important questions, and we can't use the data we've collected for other business cases. So we needed a tool at that point where we could pull it all together. We looked at a lot of tools. There are a lot of really good business continuity planning tools out there. We selected Fusion. We defined the single source of truth for all the data elements that we collected around business continuity, disaster recovery, incident management, etc. And we built out the structure in Fusion based on the data we'd already collected and the data we wanted to collect. And then we connected the dots through the tool. The result is we have a view into the data that we've never had before. And we are the only tool at my company where the data is tied to business processes and capabilities. So now, as we've matured the program, we can look at how business processes tie to each other. So process to process dependencies, how they get tied to sites, how they tie to the technology environment, to actual people, to business capabilities, to vendors, to the supply chain, to physical equipment. We've ability to identify those single points of failure that could cause a business disruption. And we're able to understand who and what gets impacted by the failure of a specific site, a specific piece of technology, an application, or vendor. And we can use that data we have to improve the management of risk by showing those risk intersections where the processes that we have and the capabilities that we have and the things we need to make those processes work. We can show those intersections so we can understand how things might break and so how we might put them back together again. So we're bringing value. That's what you need to continue to bring value to your organization. The number of risks that we see out there across the landscape are ever increasing, but there are not unlimited dollars to mitigate those risks. So we want to help our organizations to spend their mitigating dollars on the right risks. We need to understand what could cause a disruption and then what the effect would be to operations, to reputation, to compliance, to finance. Because if we focus on those risk intersections, again, where the processes and the things we need to do those processes interact, we can paint a picture of how the company works, how it could break, and how it would be put back together again. You've got to have the data to identify these risk intersections. So we've got to understand all of the different places where things interact. And then we can talk about business continuity management as a program in a different way. We can talk about the risks we're focused on and the impacts we could face. And then we can talk to leaders in a planful way about what we can do to reduce some of those potential impacts. That drives risk-based decision making. So we acknowledge that we've got a problem. We look at our risk tolerance around the problem. We look at the viable options for solving the problem. We do an objective analysis of that, what the risk is versus the reward. We look at the inherent risk and the residual risk, and then we take it up to leadership and we say, hey, we've identified this thing. This is what we think we should do about it. We have a healthy debate about the pros and cons and the inherent risk and the residual risk, and then we get approval to implement new risk strategies to help mitigate the risk that we've identified. This is an example of just data we've collected. So here's a vendor that we use and some basic information about the vendor and how much money we spend with them and what our criticality and complexity of the relationship with that vendor is, number of customer touch points and customer operability, the data sensitivity of the data that we share with that vendor, the regulatory scope of the transactions that they have with us, the performance consistency we've seen from them, whether we're satisfied with them, and here we go. This comes from the business continuity planning program. All of the business processes who have identified that that particular vendor is key for them to deliver their services. We also take this, whoops, I don't think I can open that this way, but I'll show you in a little bit. We report on that. We look at all of the vendors across our risk area, the key vendors that have been identified by our business lines. Excuse me, the key, we've identified all of those points related to that vendor. We rank all of those points in terms of, or weight them in terms of their importance to Cambia. And then we create a heat map that shows where those vendors land on the heat map, and it identifies those vendors that present the greatest risk for us. So it allows us to establish a governance program around those vendors that we never had before, that asks us to go out and look at their business continuity or disaster recovery program, to look at their InfoSec, how they protect the data that they have that we share with them. We could do site visits, we could do audits of their program, and we could require that we test or exercise with them. So depending on how this vendor presents itself as in relation to the risks, we can decide what governance program we need to put in place. So now we have a business continuity team that collaborates with the other risk management areas of Cambia to identify threats and vulnerabilities that could cause an event, to raise awareness of specific physical, mechanical, technical, human, or data threats or vulnerabilities across the organization, and we could champion specific recommendations to reduce the impact of that threat or decrease the vulnerability to that identified threat. That's what that data has given us the power to do. But we had to build the program first. We had to collect all that data first before we were able to then take it and use it in this way and bring that value to the company. So you want to start as a project. Business continuity usually starts at as a project, and then transition it to a program. You've got to sell why you have to do this. You've got to initiate the project, build your planning team, identify all of the vital records, and make sure that you back them up. You got to identify your risks and what mitigating strategies are already in place. I will tell you, there are many more risks than we have dollars to mitigate against them. So you want to focus on the risks that could cause the greatest impact to your organization. I told you I'm an earthquake country, so from an earthquake country perspective, it's very important for me to protect my technology from the impact of shaking in an earthquake. So we've spent dollars to mitigate the potential of a piece of technology to fall off a shelf when the ground is shaking beneath it. So we've spent dollars to do that, but we're not in tornado country, so we're not going to mitigate, do things to mitigate against tornado. So it's important that you identify the types of risks your area has so that you can spend the mitigating dollars that you've got on the right risks. That's why we do risk management within business continuity, is to identify those things that could hurt us and what we should do to mitigate it. You got to do a business impact analysis. That's where you figure out what the impact is. Again, we're going to focus on business impact. That's what really matters. And the resources that your business operations need to run. You got to select and implement a recovery strategy. You've got to build those life safety and incident management programs. You've got to document the plan. And then you've got to transition from a project into a program. That means you've got to have regular distribution of the plan documents, regular plan maintenance, and regular plan testing. I'm going to show you this rather than linking that way. I actually brought up Fusion. So this is the Fusion tool. It's built on Salesforce.com. Again, there's a lot of great business continuity tools out there. This is the one we've selected. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to start at that site level, because remember I told you we do all of our planning by site. So here's our site in Tacoma. It's a site that we physically own, its address, who our primary alert commander is for that site, and our facility manager, and the major risks that that particular site has. So the biggest risk that site has is earthquake, volcano, and a transportation mishap because of its physical location. The site capacity for that site is 609 people. It was built in 1992. Here's all the square footage, how many tenants we might have in that building, number of stories for that building. Here's our map that shows our assembly locations for that site. So if we did evacuate people from the building where they're supposed to gather, both their primary locations and alternate locations. Here's our incident management teams. We have an assessment team, an initial response team, and a local incident response team, which I'll open up in just a minute. Here's our tangible impact. Again, we actually use the data infusion for our property and casualty insurance renewals. So this is our insured value of the building's contents, the technologies, number of people that are physically assigned to that site, the average salaries for all of those 446 people for a standard business day. So our productivity loss, if every single one of those people was unable to work for an entire day, that's our productivity loss. The cost of workstations and conference rooms and offices and IT equipment and et cetera. Here's our plans that we have identified with the site. We have an incident management plan, which is our local incident response team plan, our occupant emergency plan, which is our blue alert team plan. And here we go. Here's all the business processes that are operating within that site. Here's the alternate work locations. Here's all the physical hardware components that we have living in that site. So a bunch of servers and network gear and et cetera. Here's some exercises we've conducted in that site, and then some miscellaneous equipment that also was located in that site. So there's two purposes for this view of the Tacoma office. The first purpose is that property and casualty renewal. If we lost the Tacoma facility, we could print out this documentation and show them that we update this every week, and that this is everything we lost with inside that building, everything we had inside that building. Second purpose of this view is if my CEO comes to me and says, Kelley, remind me what's in Tacoma again, I can also show him everything that's in Tacoma. Now, if I look at our local incident response team for the Tacoma site, you can see we have 36 people that are part of that local incident response team, from insurance people, strategic communications people. We have our incident commanders, our physical security people, our privacy people, our real estate and facilities people, our IT people, et cetera. So all of these people are assigned a role within this site. And then if I pull up this person, and he actually works for me, so he knows I share his data all the time, we get a feed from our HR database that tells me everything I ever wanted to know about Christian. I know who he works for, what his cost center is, what his employee ID number is, his work phone, his home phone, his email, his home address, etc. I know that he's an employee that lives in Salt Lake City, or is assigned to our Salt Lake City site, and he actually is physically located in that site. If you looked at me, it would say that I was assigned to the Portland site, but my site group would actually be remote because I'm a full-time remote employee. From our real estate and facilities, we know that he's in Salt Lake in the East Building on the 4th floor in space 419. He actually occupies 120.9375000 square feet because some accountant somewhere thought that was really important to know. We know that he's got a laptop and 2 monitors assigned to him. And here's all the teams that he's a part of. So this gives me all this information about Christian as a person. And then if I go to business functions, and I'm going to pick on human resources because, believe it or not, I actually report up through human resources. Here's my human resources business continuity plan. So I have my planner, an alternate planner, who approves the plan, who the senior leadership member, so our corporate leadership team, who that is, that this particular plan. So when I do my reporting up to leadership, it shows that this particular plan gets reported up to Mark Stimson. Here's our quick reference: gather, assess, decide, mobilize, communicate, recover. Our communication strategies. The last time we did exercises for this business function, And then within this business function, I have a bunch of processes. So I have benefits, compensation, employee relations, talent acquisition, technology payroll, etc. So we do most of our testing at the business function level, but most of our documentation is done at a process level. And the reason is because there are different processes that make up human resources have different recovery times and different technologies that they use and different sites that they're located in. So we want to make sure that we get down to that process level to understand what our requirements are to build a plan. So here's human resources benefits. So their strategies, both long and short term, are to have transfer some staff to surviving sites or have people work from home. Their business capability is corporate services, and their sub-capability is human resources and talent. That's what their capabilities are. This is the last time the business continuity planner reviewed each of these parts of this process. So they're required again to do this every 6 months to make sure that they document anything that might have changed. Here's where we do our constant BIA. So we look at the impact that this particular process has on the organization, and we talk about it from a customer reputational impact, a financial impact, an operational impact, and a regulatory impact. And depending on how the planner answers these questions, we come up with a process impact score, a recovery time objective for the business process, and the tier that that process is in. Here's the work locations. This particular business process works in our Portland office. Their required applications that they're dependent upon are Lawson, which is our Human Resources Benefits Program. Their process-to-process dependencies are they're dependent for this process to operate. Finance, FinOps, payroll has to also be operational. Here's the vendors that they're required to do their job. They don't have any vital records. Another area of HR would have an I-9 as a vital record, for example, but not every business process has a vital record that needs to be accounted for. So a lot of our planning is done at that business process level. And if I look at applications, just to give you an idea of the detail we capture on applications, I'm going to use radar because it's easy for me to explain what radar does. Radar is our imaging applications, so those things that come in for the business lines to process as work and need to go through that work management program come in through radar. That's our application. It's a tier 2 application. A tier 2 application in our world has a 72-hour RTO. It's a document archive. Business application, it's in production. We have a technology manager, an architect, and a support group that are responsible for this application. Identify the life cycle stage of the application. Here's all the physical components that this application needs to operate. There are 39 of them, and you notice that we have our prod applications, our PPMO, which is just pre-prod applications, and our development environment. Obviously, when we do an ITDR, we're not going to recover PPMO or dev. We're only going to recover prod. But these are the physical hardware components that we're required to do this. And again, comes from the business continuity planners. Here's all the business processes that are dependent upon this application. And we ask them very specific questions about whether they can do the process without the app, if they have other manual processes, etc., so that we can identify the criticality of a specific application based on the processes that are dependent upon it and the tier that those processes live in. We also have, I can show you our vendors. So again, here's our vendor information. I showed you this, copy this in the slides. So the services they provide, again, all of this information about the vendors, what they do for us, the type of data we share, how dependent we are on them, whether they have any regulatory impacts, what kind of performance we're seeing from them, And then again, all the business processes that are dependent upon this vendor in order to be able to operate. I'm going to go back to my slideshow. So that's kind of where we've captured the data that we started capturing 10 years ago through InfoPath. We took that data, we put it into the plan, or into the tool. We agreed on a single source of truth for that data. So anything related to people comes from HR. Anything related to IT is a feed from IT. Anything related to the facilities are a feed from our real estate and facilities folks, etc. So you identify a single source of truth, and we get a feed into Fusion from their tools to keep that data up to date. So I'm going to encourage you, don't get caught without a plan. See, these folks had a great Blue Alert team. They evacuated their goldfish bowl quickly and they got out, but of course they're still in trouble because they don't have an alternate site and they don't have a plan. So my favorite business continuity funding, don't get caught without a plan. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. If you have any questions or comments on this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. Be happy to share any information that I can to help you transition your program or your project, your business continuity and disaster recovery into a program that brings value to your organization. So thank you all very much. Look forward to hearing from you.